Muy bueno, everyone. How are you? I'm Rachel, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. I'm sure you recognise this building, don't you? Yes? Of course you do. It's St John's Church. Well, I'm part of the St John's Church family, just like you are. And I'm going to tell you about a big adventure that I went on with some other people from some of the other churches around here. I'm going to tell you these things. I'm going to tell you about getting there, who I met, can't see you, who I met and what I noticed, and something else about making friends and being friends. Okay, here we go. Well, first of all, where were we going? Now, here's a clue. Look carefully. Can you see the name on the aeroplane? That's right, it's Zambia. And we flew there. Now, Zambia is in Africa. I'd never been to Africa before. It was very exciting to be going to Zambia. So off we went. I wonder if you've been in aeroplanes too. It's very, very interesting looking out of the window. And as I looked, and as we crossed over Africa, I noticed that the countryside was very, very different from how it is here in Keynsham. As I looked down, I couldn't see any fields. I could see lots of trees dotted around. And as evening drew on, I noticed there was a river in the background, but no towns, anything like that. Very different. Anyway, after a while, we landed. After a long, long while. It was evening, as you can see by the shadows in the picture. But it was still very hot, and the sky was bright blue, not a bit like it had been in Keynsham. Now, there weren't very many people in the airport lounge when we arrived, but I could hear a lot of noise coming from outside. I could actually hear some singing and the sound of a crowd of people. Well, we wondered, what's all that about? Maybe they're expecting somebody. Maybe somebody important is going to be arriving at this airport soon. Anyway, we got to the door and we saw all these people, and they were singing. Lots of Zambians in all sorts of different clothes. And I thought, oh, we better wait until the important people have come through. And then, do you know what I realised? I realised that they'd all come to meet us. The visitors from Keynsham and other parts of Bath and Wells, they'd come to greet us, and they were singing the most beautiful songs for us. It was amazing. So we followed them out into a field opposite the airport. I think you can probably just see that there are some seats around, and we realised that we were going to have a special service. Now, when you have special services, I expect you have them in your hall, or you have them in St John's Church, or you watch them online from home. But I bet you don't have many special services out in the open air. Well, it wasn't a church just there, so the people were having an outdoor service. And there they are. Now, we couldn't understand very much of what they were saying, because they were speaking their language, which is called Nyanja. But we could certainly understand how happy they were. Now, here are a lot of ladies, all wearing similar clothes, and they belonged to an organisation called the Mothers' Union. And they were singing an action song. Now, you know action songs, don't you? You do action songs. Well, they were doing quite a long action song. And then down below, I think you can see some people in a youth group, and they were doing some lovely dancing for us. And we really enjoyed it, and it didn't seem to matter that we couldn't understand the language. And we sang a song to them, and they thought that was very funny, and we weren't nearly as good as they were. But anyway, it was wonderful, and that's where I first learnt to say muy bueno. How are you? Because that's what everybody says to everybody. Muy bueno. Well, next day we drove to the first place that we were going to. Here it is. So obviously we are now in Zambia. There it is. And we moved to the next place we were going to, a place called Chipata. There it is. Oh, it's very difficult to get this in the right place. There we go. It's all across my face now. Never mind. Chipata. It's a good name to remember because it starts with chips. Chipata, and it's the town that we were going to. It's a bit bigger than Keynsham. It's more like the size of Bath. Anyway, we drove there next day. So let's see what we saw. This was the first thing we saw because we arrived in a car. There aren't many cars there, but one or two people had cars and they very kindly drove us. And we arrived at a sort of car park where we could see lots more people gathering. You can see some of the Mothers' Union ladies and lots of people not in uniforms as well. And they're all gathering, and we wondered what they were all gathering for. And we noticed that there were boys wearing uniforms as well, and they were in the boys' brigade. There's a boys' brigade in Keynsham, and there's also scouts in Keynsham, and it's the same sort of thing. So we wondered, well, what's going to happen now? We were quite confused. And then we looked at this poster that they were holding, and it says, "Walking Together in Mission." And it was for our visit. Our visit was coming at a special time. It was coming 40 years after Bath and Wells diocese that you belong to first became linked with Zambia. So we were celebrating, and there was going to be a procession. That's the way that Africans like to celebrate. Don't know if you've been on many processions. We have some in Keynsham, but they do their processions in a very big way. As you can see, all the guides and Girls' Brigade and Mothers' Union and other women's groups and men's groups and bands and families with children all processing along, dancing and having a lovely time. Now this was the first time that we'd seen a town in Zambia, so we were looking out for things that would be the same or things that might be different. So while you're looking at the pictures, you could be noticing things that are the same as in Keynsham and things that are different. So some things are the same. There's a road, there's a bicycle, but I think that's a bit different, having two people on a bicycle like that. So that looks like I don't know what the building behind is, maybe a shop or something. So it looks a bit like Keynsham. There's a street sign there. There's a supermarket. Got a funny name, hasn't it? I wonder if you can read it. Choppies. But there's something you don't see so often at the bottom there. There's a family, and they've got a big bowl of bananas because they'd grown them. They'd grown the bananas on their little farms, and they'd brought them to outside Choppies supermarket to see if anybody wanted to buy some bananas. There's street lights, all sorts of things. We carried on, and we carried on through the streets of the city of Chipata. Not many cars, and quite dusty. It was a long procession, past the traffic lights, turning into another street. That man there is the person who I went with. We were in a team together. He's called Chris. Taking photographs. We carried on. We came to not so much the middle of the town, but more the outside of the town, the edges of the town, and there were some different sorts of shops there. sort of open-air shops like these. We don't get so much of that sort of thing over here, I don't think. But there's some shops that we saw. Lots of pairs of shoes for sale. And lots of buckets with things in. Very hot still, and bright blue sky. Carrying on and carrying on, getting more into the countryside, more. And now you can see the road isn't a hard road. It's a dry, dusty, muddy road. Well, it would be a muddy road if it was wet, but it's not wet, it's dry. But it's not a specially made up road. And in the distance you can see the mountains. Carrying on, we're nearly there now. It was a good way of talking to people, and everyone was very cheerful. And finally we got here. We got to our destination. And our destination was another church. This one's called St. Paul's Church. Now at first you look at it and you think, oh, it looks quite a lot like St. John's. It's got a tower, it's got a clock, it's the same sort of shape. But if you look closely you might spot some differences. Well, St. John's Church is a very, very old church, and it's nearly 800 years old, and it's made of stone. St. Paul's Church is an old church for Zambia, but it's only just about 120 or 130 years old. And if you look, it's made of brick, and its roof is made of corrugated iron or zinc, so that's a bit different. Anyway, here's everybody arriving. Now, do you remember that on my list we looked at, find the list, there it is, we looked at getting there, which we've done, and then we started to think about who I met and what I noticed. Well, the first person that I met who was really important in the story, here he is, and his name is Mr. Ngoma. Mr. Ngoma. Try and remember his name. He's a very nice man. He's a teacher. I think he teaches in a secondary school, but he does a lot of work with children as well in the school, and he has some really good ideas about education. So here he is, and this is the first time I met him. You can see in the background some more of the Mothers Union ladies and some choir people and all sorts from the church. Moving on. Mr. Ngoma talked to me about a special space that he had some ideas for. Now, this special space was behind the church. Nothing happening in it, one or two buildings, but there's a big space in the middle. A bit later on, we'll find out what that space was for, or what his idea was about the space. But meanwhile, we had a lovely meal. And then, because I always like to help, I said, can I help with the washing up? Now, we had our meal outside, and it was cooked outside on a fire, and here are the ladies, because in Africa the men don't help with the washing up very much, although they do over here, don't they? But here we are, I was helping with the washing up, and the ladies there, they laughed a bit because they wanted to see if I could do it the way that they do it, which is in great big buckets of cold water, no washing up liquid, no brushes or scouring pads, just picking up the sand, because the ground is very sandy, and using that to rub the inside of those and the outside of some very dirty pots that have been on the fire. But I did my best, and I joined in, and they thought that was great. Now, there's a lady there in a blue dress just in the middle there. I'm pointing with the arrow. And she's the next one of the special people that I met. And her name is Monica. All right. And her husband is called James. Monica and James are a lovely couple. And here they are In their garden of their house, they live in a house in the town of Chipata. They have a lovely little garden that they look after so carefully and keep it watered. And there they are outside their little house in Chipata, and that's where I stayed for a few days. So far I'd seen a little bit of the town and noticed that there are some things that are the same and there are some things that are different from Keynsham. But most people in Zambia don't live in a town, they live in the countryside. And so soon it was time for us to go and visit one of the villages. The village has a lovely name. I don't know if you'll be able to remember. It's another Chip name. It starts with Chip. But this time it's called Chipungo. Chipungo. See if you can remember that. Chipungo. So we drove out of Chipata along the dusty roads. They were more like tracks, they weren't really like roads, bumping along in the car that somebody had kindly let us use. And we were getting into the countryside and we noticed different sorts of trees. Sometimes the road looked more like a river. We had to drive through some fairly deep puddles sometimes, and it was quite muddy, and we wondered if we would get stuck. But we carried on with our driver, who was very good at the bumpy roads. We passed little villages on the way, and the people watched us go past because not many cars go along that track. There's some children outside another sort of shop, but this time the building is a traditional building made of wood and thatch on top, and they're still selling clothes, I think, there. Carrying on, and it got to evening time, and we arrived in, can you remember the name of the place? We arrived in Chipungo. And a lot of the houses were rather like that, you can see, made of walls of a sort of mud mixture that's been dried hard, and thatch, or the newer houses were made of brick like in the town, and some of them were made of a mixture of different things. And there's a closer view of one of the houses in the village. And you can see a lot of things are done outside. It's so warm and dry outside, and the houses are quite small. So a lot of things like cooking and baking and even eating and looking after animals. A lot of things are done outside while the sun's shining. And when it gets dark, people go inside and go to sleep fairly quickly and get up really early when the sun comes up. So there's lots of things are different about how people live in the villages. There's lots to find out. And then I met the next person who was special for me, and this man's name is Timothy. Okay, there's Timothy. He's looking very serious. I wonder if there are any Timothys in St. John's School. So here's Timothy. Timothy has a small farm, like most of the people in the village. They have small patches of land which they farm for food for themselves to eat and for food to sell. And he's standing by something that he made out of wood and thatch, and it's where, I think, it's where his hens live. Not quite sure, I can't remember, I'll have to check up on that. But he had lots of different buildings like that for his different animals. And I met him. And I met his family and some of his friends. They're all very kind, and they made me a very nice supper to eat. We had it inside. And in the background you can see Timothy's bicycle. Now, he has a bicycle. Hardly anybody in the village has a car, but if you've got a bicycle, that's pretty good because you can cycle into town. And here they are sitting in the shade under the tree outside. There's James sitting next to me. Later on, I met another important person, and she is called Miriam. There she is, and she's a farmer as well. She has some land, and I stayed at Miriam's house. Miriam got up very, very early in the morning when the cock crowed. It was like an alarm clock. The sun came up a bit before then. The cock crowed. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, and she got up. So I did too. I never get up that early usually. And she was already up and about. She was being very busy. I wonder if you can work out what she's doing here. Remember, everywhere is very, very dusty and sandy. Well, she's been sweeping and tidying her patch of hard ground here using a sort of broom, but it's just a collection of twigs there. That's what she's been doing early in the morning. I think she's been looking after her cows and her goats as well. Lots to do first thing. And then I met her children. Well, 2 of them were her daughters, and I've got their names. Let's see if I can remember what their names were. Yes, Ruth and Catherine were her daughters, and then Martha is her niece, and Cedric, the little boy down there, is her grandson. She was looking after all of them because it was the school holidays and they stay with her most of the time. They did have some work to try and get on with as well, some worksheets that they were doing. And behind you can see some more of her goats and one of her sheds. And that bit of wood here I think it belongs to their ox cart. But there's lots of interesting stuff to find out here. But I'm not going to tell you everything today. It would take too long. Right. Now, do you remember the last thing on the green card? We talked about getting there. We talked about who I met and what I noticed. Things that are the same and things that were different. And I talked about making friends. Well, the last thing was making friends and being friends. Well, it was easy enough for me to make friends because I was meeting people face to face, and I made friends with Miriam and Monica and James and Peter. It's harder to keep in touch with Timothy in the village because he doesn't have a phone, but I hear about how he's getting on sometimes. But we wanted more than that. We wanted the people in our church and the people in the churches there that I met to become friends. The people in Chapata and Chapungo to become friends with the people in Keynsham. Well, we can't all go and visit, especially not at the moment with coronavirus, and it wouldn't be very good for the planet if we all got in aeroplanes and flew over there all the time. But we can send texts and messages to each other, and because we believe in God and we know that He cares for them and He cares for us, we can pray for each other, and we do. And we can share in other ways. And here's a way. While I was there, I met lots and lots of lovely children who go to the churches and the Sunday schools. And I'm sure quite a few of you that are watching this go to some churches around, and maybe you go to Sunday schools or kids zones or things or family times for children. Anyway, there's lots. They like to come along because it's interesting for them. So I met lots of children, and here are just some of them. And here's another lot of children I met. Now, would you believe it, they're at Sunday school. They don't have a room to go into, so they have their Sunday school on this mat in the shade of the tree outside. Well, you might think that's nice to be outside, and it is. But there are a lot of things you can't do if you haven't got a place to meet or if you haven't got any stuff to use. The teachers, the Sunday school teachers, do their best, but they haven't got much stuff. And when I got home and I was talking to our Sunday school children, our kids' own children, this is a couple of years back, about the children in Zambia, they realised that we have quite a lot of stuff, don't we? In Sunday school, for example, and at your school, things like we've got some nice Lego to play with, and we have books, and we have pens and pencils and Bibles to look at, and we can have a place inside when it's not good weather. And these children decided, because we were trying to be friends, that they would like to collect some money, to save some money, so that the Sunday school children in Chipata and Chipunga could have a few more of the things that we have, like crayons and books and toys and a bit of shelter and all sorts. And that's what we did. We sent some money over that the children had collected, and then our friends in Chipata worked out what they needed, worked out what they could buy with the money, bought lots of things and shared it out amongst the 4 churches. So people from all the 4 churches in Chipata all had some stuff for their children, and you can see what they've got in the picture, all sorts of things that are going to be useful for the Sunday schools. And of course, the children were all thrilled and delighted when they received these gifts from the children in Keynsham. It was great to have the stuff, the toys and the materials and the crayons and the books and so on, but it was just as great to know that on the other side of the world there were some more children who were thinking about them and who wanted to be friends and wanted to care for them and show that they were interested, and show that we're all, because we're all children of God, we're all brothers and sisters wherever we come from, in a way. Well, now we're sharing in an even bigger way. And the next picture is a clue about what I'm going to tell you about next. It's someone doing a cartwheel. Now, I think some of you in St John's School might know about this and might know who this cartwheeling person is, because she goes to your school, and she's called Izzy Lowe. Now, I couldn't possibly do even one cartwheel, but Izzy has done 700 cartwheels, and I'll tell you why. Now, in Zambia, in Chipata, quite a lot of children go to school. Every child in Britain goes to school, and there are schools in Zambia like this one in the background, and here are the children who go to that school. But not all the children can go to school. Some of them stay at home, is inside the schoolroom, and there just aren't really enough schools to go round for everybody to be able to go, and you have to buy a uniform to go to school, and not every family can afford that. And as you can see, the classrooms are a bit different from yours, aren't they? So the teachers, there are lots of children in the class, and the teachers don't have some of the things that you have in your classrooms to learn with. And you can spot some differences, I'm quite sure. But what we thought, do you remember this space? This is where it's important. This is the space that Mr. Ngoma told us about. And in that space he has a dream that one day a school might be built here next to the church, so that more children in Chipata can go to school. So in our church family here in Keynsham, and with the help of people like Izzy and some of the other children too who go to other schools, we thought, let's try and raise some more money to try and help build a school in Chipata. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if we had a Lego model of the school? And here we are. So as we raise the money, we can put more bricks onto our Lego model, and we'll be able to see how much money we've raised. So we've been doing that for a little while, and I'm very pleased to tell you that the building was started. There it is next to that church, St Paul's Church. They're building the foundations, and now they've almost finished. Well, of course, there's lots of things as well as a building that you need for a school. You need the desks and the chairs and the things to go inside. But soon these empty rooms will have children in them. And because the children are getting an education, that will give them a better chance to have a better future. And so that's our way of being friends with our link parish, Chipata South. Well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my adventure a couple of years ago. And there's lots for you to think about, and maybe you'll find out some more about what it's like in Zambia. And I would love to tell you some more about my adventures in the village, but that will be for another time. So I'm going to say goodbye now, and it's been lovely to meet you and to talk to you. And to finish with, I'm going to play you the sound of some singing that I heard in the little village church in Chipungo. So I'm going to hope to play that to you now.